Coogs House. The Big Ten has been vocalizing terrible ideas for the college football playoff all summer long in an effort to squash conferences like the Big 12 and schools like Houston. But holy cow, this is their worst one yet.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you make sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. Enjoying the conversation, but you don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below if you're, as far as game day attire goes, are you a polo person, a t-shirt person, a jersey person, body paint, hoodies? What do you wear to the game when it's time to go cheer on the Cougs? I got my Section 12X polo on today. These are brand new. I think I'm one of the first people to get one of these. It's got the Marching Coug on my hat on it. Really, really cool stuff. Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. More on that fun later as well. I want to talk about this actually, polo at some point in the show, I'm sure. But I want to talk first about the Big Ten's bad idea. I want to talk then about how this impacts the Big 12 in Houston and why they can't let that happen. Last but not least, Houston's got the fastest quarterback in America, and he's probably not the starter. But let's jump to this Big Ten topic. Now, listen, the Big Ten has some really good academic institutions in it, and we'll call it creative problem solving. But this is a truly awful idea. The proposal that the Big Ten has apparently pushed out, some, I guess, people from inside the meeting are saying it was said in the meeting, is a proposal for a 2018 playoff where there are 7 Big Ten schools, 7 SEC schools, 5 Big 12, 5 ACC, 2 non-Power 4 schools, and 2 at-large schools, otherwise called the 7-7-5-5-2-2 program. Now, I don't know why I didn't just do 752 squared or something. I don't know. Numbers get to be a lot. That adds to 28 teams. And as it stands, I think a Big 12 fan might look at them and go, okay, wait a second. There are 6 Big 12 teams in the AP top 28. That doesn't sound so bad. But the real goal of this, I think, for the Big Ten that they're publicizing is that they wanted to get more playoff games on college campuses. That worked remarkably well for a gate revenue perspective. TV ratings were through the charts last year because they were meaningful games or big games when the first round of the playoff happened at home for some schools last year. Just weren't very many of them, right? And having a first round happen at home stadiums with a big 2018 playoff would have 14 different home games all of a sudden, right? And listen, I think that that's interesting. I want to wrap up that at the end of the segment as well, actually, why that's interesting. But having more home games is great and it's rewarding high ranked teams by giving them a home game. And it's going to be, elimination playoff style football. It's great. However, this proposal, because of how far back you'd have to start the playoff to get a 2018 playoff in and still have your 12 game schedule that a lot of schools have paid to have scheduled for a few years out at this point, like you pay your non-conference opponents, whatever, you set those up years in advance, would probably almost certainly require eliminating conference championship games, right? Which also brings into question, well, then how do you get the rankings for those 7-7-5-2-2s or whatever? But getting rid of conference championship games is something I'm not ever going to be on board with. You're just not talking about how heavy they weigh or whatever different categories, talking about how you pick who's in them. We can talk about it. I'm never going to get on board with getting rid of conference championship football games. But I don't get it. And I have to say, it's an interesting proposal to say we're going to get rid of a game that does really well on TV, right? I would imagine this is not an SEC show, but the Big Ten has trying to curtsy favor here with the SEC because once they're the two, those two conferences agree on things as the two biggest media market share or media partner shares, they actually legally, there's different stuff in the contract with the CFP, but they don't necessarily need complete 100% agreement out of anyone else. So it feels like they're trying to curtsy favor with the SEC. The SEC rejected the idea of the previous 4-4-2-2-2 or whatever it was. Model got us up to 16, pitched by the Big Ten as well, on the idea of having, they SEC thought if we're gonna have more than 12 schools, we might be able to get more than 4 spots on our own. Why do we need these automated spots or whatever? And so this feels like the Big Ten's throwing them, hey, well, here, how about 7 spots, right? 7 spots. For reference, last year's 7th-ranked team in the SEC was a 9-4 LSU team. The 9-4 is kind of deceiving because they spent most of the season unranked, had a relatively easy schedule. And then also, for what it's worth, the 7th team last year in the Big Ten was an 8-5 Michigan team. Also spent more than half the season unranked in the AP. So that's how that shakes out. If you're looking at like what kinds of teams are we talking about adding here? And listen, that Michigan team beat Ohio State, who ended up winning the national championship. Any team winning again Saturday, I guess that's part of the fun. But I think it's telling, and this is anyway. I think it's telling that the solution, when it was like, oh, let's add more playoff games on college campuses, was to expand the playoff, set up automatic bids, and get rid of conference championship games by this Big Ten proposal, right? It was not, let's just play the games at those home campuses and get away from the bowl affiliations. It was not, let's extend the season a couple weeks into the NFL playoffs. It was not, I don't know, insert other proposal there, right? The only natural thing they could come up with was, hey, let's get rid of these conference championship games. Because admittedly in the Big Ten, if you're going to have Michigan, Ohio State play each other every year, that I know last year was kind of an off year, but it's kind of Ohio State and the also rans. Now it's Oregon, Ohio State, and the also rans, right? Anyway, that's how that goes. And and of course they want some home field because we're talking about games in December and January, and relative to like the rest of these major programs, that Big Ten across the north, the exception of the LA schools, that's pretty significant weather advantage as we saw in the Penn State playoff game last year and stuff like that. Those things play a big, big role. Now, Parker Fleming points out, Parker Fleming's a fun Stats of War on Twitter, fun college football follow if you're into the data and analytics side of things. And he looks at numbers in interesting ways and charts and things like that. But he points out that the BCS was a flawed system, and it was not perfect by any stretch or any measure or any means. But it did have computers spit out to us an order of teams based on a bunch of stats. And yeah, Bob Stoops at Oklahoma ran out the score to help his stats, and that's the thing that happened, right? But ultimately, the flaw with that, and this is me expanding on that a little bit, the flaw with that was that there were just 2 teams in a BCS championship game, and thus there was no real room for error, right? If the BCS computer did not give you the 2 teams that we thought as a collective should have been in it, that's just 2 teams, right? There's no way to play it out further than that. It just gave you only 2 teams with no room for error in the computers or error in the math or anything like that, right? The solution to that error, as Parker Fleming points out, was to put this whole thing behind closed doors and let it get picked by folks tied to TV exec. Now, I'm not saying there aren't ADs and stuff like that. There aren't people tied to football involved. However, this became a bigger TV deal once it went behind those closed doors. And that's clearly what we're seeing here. We're going to have, big blue blood programs that have like helmets that have been around for a long time. And that's going to be where you're looking at this. I think it's also interesting that like the proposal here is a playoff that has these automatic bids and lots of bids per conference when no other level of football or any college sport does that. The FCS and the lower divisions of football each have automatic bids in a large playoff bracket, but conferences only get one each, right? In March Madness, college basketball, each conference technically only gets one auto bid. Now, the Big 12, for example, will always have a large number of teams in March Madness tournament, but only one gets there automatically, right? And it's interesting that we refuse to look at anything like that I mean, the Big 12 is very much behind. We'll talk about the Big 12 in a second. You have a 5 and 11 model. But it's interesting that we're not even the Big 10 and the SEC are not even, I guess the Big 10 really at this point is not even proposing that. They're not willing to do that because of what that could mean for their at-large teams maybe not making it. Anyway, I want to ask how this is the Big 12, bring this back to the Big 12 a little bit closer to home in just 1 second. Before we get to there, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Drip Drop. This one's new. This one's fun, folks, because when I'm on top of my hydration game, I notice everything works better. I use this Drip Drop to get me there, my focus, my skin, my mood, everything. Drip Drop's a great product to keep you hydrated in that hot summer tailgate season as we get into August and September. Football games happening in August, September. That's why I've been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of your leading sports drink. Again, take it to your tailgate. Thank me later. Drink it in the morning when you're working out. Drink it at lunch when you're hitting that mid-afternoon lull. That lull goes away. Trust me on this. Right now, Drip Drop's offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Head to dripdrop.com. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com. LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here. And this Big Ten proposal is all over college sports stuff everywhere. And I think a lot of people are okay, but like Big Ten's dumb. We get it. How does this hit the Big 12? And I think this is an interesting play by that Big 12 because it's another level of enticement. It's entirely a gigantic trap. It's a bigger piece of cheese in the mousetrap. It's a sweeter or a dozen donuts instead of a single donut under the little box with the thing that they pull the stick out and it falls on top of you. It's all those things because, frankly, it stands to reason that the Big 12 had just one team in the football playoff last year. The ACC had 2, and the conference could easily look at that playoff revenue and say, listen, if you're going to guarantee me 5 spots, that's a lot. And further, that 5 is a lot closer to the 7 that the Big 10 and SEC got than the 2 to 4, which is like a half of it ratio, right? And all that. And frankly, you could look at the top 28. If you extend the AP poll out to 28, the Big 12's got 6 teams in that top 28. So maybe this is worth it for the Big 12, right? I mean, you're essentially saying we can get those 5 teams in plus an at-large team potentially. We both can reasonably say that TV executives picking this will probably not pick a Big 12 or an ACC team for that 6th team. They'll probably take an 8th Big 12, an 8th Big 10 or an 8th SEC team. But I digress. Last year in this model, you'd have had Arizona State, Iowa State, Colorado, BYU, and I believe Baylor would have won the tiebreaker. Tech and TCU each had the same record, but Baylor beat both of them. So I think that would have been your 5th team in. I don't know, right? And that sounds great, right? Hey, look, that's 5 playoff teams. I think Baylor and BYU probably would have beaten more people than people realized. Iowa State's a program I got a lot of respect for as well. Totally cool, right? Totally cool. However, you can't fall for the trap. You can't reach under the box. You can't go for the cheese. You can't go for the trap because this is admitting, if as a Big 12 you sign off on it, some level of inferiority. It's admitting you get 7, we get 5. And is that closer than 4 and 2 are? Yes. Is it still 2 schools difference? Obviously, percentage is different. Sure. It doesn't work. You got to go for the auto bids, 1 per conference. Let the rest of it figure itself out. Right? And let's assume they did this 2018 7-7-5-2-2 deal, right? And let's assume that those at-large bids were Notre Dame and insert some random independent or a third group of 5. That wouldn't happen, but let's say it happens, right? Suddenly, that difference of 2 schools, and this is the closest the difference would be is those 2, right? That difference is $8 million, $4 million per program. You're guaranteeing in the first round of the playoffs that those other conferences that you're trying to grow to catch up to, you're guaranteeing they get $8 million more dollars as a conference than you, at least every single year. That's before you get to the second round. That's before you beat them on the field to prove it. They get $8 million more dollars than you in the first round of the playoff every single year. Now they have to disperse that across the conference. Conference getting bigger. That number gets thinner. I get that. But that is handing them resources as you're trying to catch up to them. That's handing the person in front of the race drip drop while you're trying to catch them from behind. Like you want the drip drop for yourself. You want the resources for yourself, right? And this is really the Big Ten trying to get the SEC to agree. I outlined that earlier, but I'll say it again. Frankly, the way the college football playoff is set up, any adjustment to it will come from those 2 conferences in consultation with others, right? And so they just have to have some way to show that they consulted with, and they don't have to get 100% agreement from the ACC and the Big 12 and so on, right? And frankly, if they took this to court and Brett Yormark was as firm as if they tried to push this and Yormark was as firm as he was with the 5+11 model over the summer, which I'd imagine he would still be because the same principles should apply. I'd imagine Brett Yormark, the Big 12, the ACC, I imagine they sue and this gets tied up in court and doesn't happen for a while, right? And last but not least, I think that the importance for Houston here needs to be specifically examined because this is the table getting set for Houston arriving, right? 10 years ago, won a Peach Bowl 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, hey, we just got to win the group of 5. We can be one of those 2 schools in. Who cares after that, right? Once we get there, they can't tackle Greg Ward. We're all good, right? Let's rock and roll. Let's do it. Who cares? Get us 1 spot. We can take that spot, right? Now that you're a Power 4 team, this is different because you're playing a game where your schedule is much more difficult every year. Even though I would say last year's is more so than this year, compared to the American Athletic Conference schedules, your schedule is more difficult every year. You're going to probably take a couple lumps. Teams don't typically go undefeated anymore. That's part of the point. And moreover, you're getting better as a program as the tables are changing, as the tides are turning, the leaves are falling, whatever you want to call it. As this program is growing into the mature program that is relatively quickly, I think they're ahead of schedule in the rebuild. I really do. Class 2026, sick. Greatest class in Cougar history, right? Great offensive coordinator comes in. Eddie Nunez leading the charge in marketing on things as the AD. Willie Fritz is the right coach for this. Like they are moving things in the right direction. And if other people start to get to pick what's at the end of that road as you go down that direction, you got to speak up as a conference. You also got to make sure as Houston, you're paying attention and you're pushing the Big 12 to do the right things. And Nunez and the ADs, the Big 12, need to make sure this is happening because Houston could certainly be the 5th best team in the Big 12 in 2026, 2027. I don't mean to say they couldn't, and that theoretically in the 2018 playoff put them in. But they could also be good enough to win the whole thing, frankly, that same time, if not 2028. And there's weirder things happen than win the whole thing than this year. I mean, that look at what happened to Arizona State last year. They won the way they won this Big 12 conference. There's nothing that says that Houston can't, right? But this program is heading to somewhere where they're going to have to be recognized at large by the nation in 2028, 9, 2030, right? That's the way this recruiting cycle is spinning. That's what direction this is going. that's the staff you've got on deck right now. Frankly, you're seeing large investments in things like the $160 million football facility. You're having Eddie Nunez come out and say, we are going to participate in 100% of the rev share possible. You got all these things happening as the scene is changing. You got to make sure the scene's not changing in a way that hurts you for being a Big 12 school. And I think that's the interesting part of this, because I don't know how much success on a football field Texas had in their time in the Big 12 or A&M or Missouri. Oklahoma did. But if you were to say like, well, but Parker, we could just get to the SEC at some point later down the road, Big 10 later down the road or whatever, that's fair. But theoretically, that would require some level of national prominence and success. And this may be an attempt to put a barrier on that as well. And so, I don't know. I think it really does matter for the future of Houston athletics, because frankly, this is not talking about the 2025 season, right? This is talking about after that. And I think Houston's going to be really, really good. I think this thing is moving in the right direction. I think it's moving forward. And I think you got to pay attention to how things are going. Speaking of how things are going, Houston's got a really, 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 really fast quarterback. And the country knows, at least now they might know. Talk about that in a second. But first, today's show is, as mentioned at the top, brought to you by our buddies over Game Time. If you've ever just decided last minute, hey, I'm going to go to the ball game today, friends, family, it's game day, suddenly I got to be in the stands, that is where Game Time comes in to help you on your game day. It's the easy way to grab last minute without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can pick up more food, merch, invite a bigger group, whatever the case may be. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Price on the app actually lower, closer to the first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, lowest price guarantees, and it takes the worry out of buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time. Download Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Parker, Locked On Coogs here, and Austin Carlisle may officially be the fastest quarterback in America. Carlisle is the standout freshman, incoming freshman, I should say, rising freshman from Ridgepoint High School. He has the highest speed rating on the college football video game in 2026. Now, I can hear you chuckling from here. I get it. You're not a gamer yourself. However, these aren't just throwing crap at a wall. They're basing this on some data, and it feels like between Carlisle's track times as well as his workout times he's been given at the University of Houston, he has earned the right to be the fastest quarterback in America. First of all, the data here. He went 10.5 as a junior in high school in the 100-meter dash. That's really stupid fast. If you're looking for a technical term, it's really stupid fast. That's a technical term. While working out at Houston, he was clocked in at 23.7 miles per hour. That means he hit 23.7 miles per hour. For reference, that would have been the fastest in the NFL last season had it happened in a football game, in the NFL football games that happened at a Houston workout. Joe Duarte wrote on this, so I don't want to take too much shine away from Duarte's piece in the Chronicle as well on it. I do think it's interesting, though, to think about how will Houston utilize so much speed, because I still think as a true freshman, Carlisle's probably a third-string quarterback. We heard over the weekend that Willie Fritz said that Connor Wegman is the starting quarterback, which is of no surprise. But he did mention that he didn't specifically say with Wegman's injury history. I should leave that. It's more me editorializing. But in general, that it's a collision sport and that you always have to get a couple guys ready to play the position because you just never know what's going to happen, right? And we also know that as much as we're rooting for Wegman, a lot of this does depend on his health, and he's been beaten up a couple seasons in a row, and it's not the kind of, none of it seems like a lingering thing, but also it seems like the kind of thing you got to be careful of. And so you go second quarterback. It looks like Zion Chris, who started in and won 3 conference games for Houston last year. I think that's important to point out as well. Zion Chris had a pretty strong outing, all things considered. Now, he's not quite the passer that Wegman is, but he is certainly a gifted runner and certainly won some games, again, in this conference as a starter. Um, so I think you got to keep that in mind. And then you have Carlisle, a highly touted recruit, a guy everyone loves, guy loves representing for the city, and kind of been overshadowed, honestly, because the 2026 big time recruit is also a quarterback in Keyshawn Harrison, an athletic quarterback, I'll say, because he used to be considered just an athlete, and now he is a quarterback. 5-star. Some people have him as the top kid in the state, right? I think most people that don't probably docked him when he got committed to Houston. But anyway, Carlisle falls off the chart in a couple different ways in that, and that's probably not fair. The guy is extremely athletic, extremely hardworking, and frankly, word coming out of campus, the kid's also really smart. And I think that what's interesting here is that intelligence thing we think of as a quarterback means that he can process a lot, and he probably can. I wonder if it means that he'll be doing more than just playing quarterback. We heard from Willie Fritz at Media Days last month, a little over a month ago at this point, that Carlisle had been receiving punts. The joke he said a couple times is he's got to catch him, but he can really run when he does. I don't know if that means he can't or not. I think a quarterback typically has pretty good hands. Actually, I think he'd probably be good at it. But you could see him could you see Carlisle's speed in the return game? I think about this all the time, and I actually hate the Aggies a lot. But I think about Ryan Tannehill, a longtime NFL quarterback, was top 10 pick quarterback. His first couple of years at A&M, he was actually a wide receiver, and I don't even remember who their quarterback was. Doesn't really matter. It was not someone who played a long time in the NFL though, and Tannehill started off as a receiver there. And you still learn the offense, still learn to read the coverages, and learn a lot of things. And I wonder if there's some of that in Carlisle's career. I mean, you got to get the ball in his hands. You got to get him out in space. You run him as a slot, you run him on arrow routes. We call it inside outs, but we pivots and those kind of things. Like what do you do with him to get him the ball in space? Because he is this electric weapon, and he is the fastest quarterback in college football. I also wonder if we've talked a lot about Zion Chris getting a potential running quarterback package. Not the kind of way we can't run. I think indications are he's actually more fleet of foot than we might have realized. But do you want some sort of a package based around a running quarterback to kind of give a wildcatty kind of look? Well, insert your smart, athletic, fast freshman Austin Carlisle. Like, do you give him that package? Let Zion Chris not get hit because you might have to put him in if something happens, right? And do you go with Austin Carlisle and say, hey, we're going to run these 2 or 3 RPOs. You need to get really, really good at these because the third-string quarterback doesn't get a lot of reps than anything else, right? Is that maybe more palatable? Is that more easy to digest for a guy that was playing high school football this time a season ago, right? Like, I don't know what the answer, but I do think that it opens a lot of fun doors. And Nagel has shown it's usually more through window dressing and moving his line and stuff around and moving formations. But Nagel has shown creativity in his time at Tulane as the offensive coordinator. And I think that Carlisle's speed offers some fun stuff with that. I also think that having Tanner Kozel as a tight end, right? We talk about him having he's a true pass catching threat, 94 catches last season, right? Like, I think that offers interesting layers to the offense as well. Stacey Sneed being a great receiving running back. Dean Connors doing a lot of different things as a running back. A couple different tight ends like Jaden York is both a blocker and a pass catcher. A lot of things that make this offense flexible. Why wouldn't that extend into Austin Carlisle? I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's chaos, but I'm open to hearing if you do. Now, we are less than 2 weeks away from the first kickoff of the 2025 Houston Cougar football season. So I'm excited to tell you that the content is going to be coming each and every day. Can't wait to get more out to you as we talk all things Houston Cougar football between now and then. Now, if more basketball news comes out or something like that, obviously we'll get in on that as well. Other fall sports are in full swing. Volleyball has been doing their preseason stuff for the weekend. Heard that went pretty extremely well, actually. So interesting to see how they replace Kate Trajatis as they move on from one of the best athletes Houston Cougar football history, Houston Cougar volleyball history, honestly. So we'll see more on that. Trivia question. Last time the trivia question was, what was Houston's record versus Arkansas in basketball all time? I've done that. That was 2-1 all time in basketball. 2-1. That actually might be a post 2000 number. So correct me if I'm wrong. Someone's going to down below. That's definitely a post 2000 number. There's no way. Anyway, the trivia question I want to ask you today. So on Twitter, I think it was someone quoting Go Coogs, but I don't think they added them though. Anyway, rumored week 0 matchup for 2025 a few years back that never happened was Houston versus Michigan State. It would have been just the second time the two programs have ever met in football. And so my question for you is, what happened the first time? Where was it? Who won? What was the score? When did it happen? If you got anything about Houston versus Michigan State in football, the only time they've ever played, tell us in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for tuning in today to Locked On Cougs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.